That would be. Were you at all the Bush races that he attended as a driver as well?
I was at pretty much every race. The only ones that they told us not to attend, basically not to bring family. And my dad always wanted to bring us. I mean, I know there's kind of a dichotomy of opinion, I guess, when it comes to a lot of drivers maybe can struggle sometimes with the family there because the family can be a distraction and they're there to work. And but for my dad, it was it was a distraction if we weren't there. So we were always at the races, and I always tried to go and listen to the debrief with the crew chiefs or with the engineers in sports car racing, and listen to the him talk with other drivers. And I remember the last one probably 2010, maybe 2009, when he was teammates with Danica, and just listening to him and Danica talk was super interesting, and everything with her IndyCar background, that her opinions of what was going on, and obviously getting some info from my dad, and them just kind of talking. And that's where I think I learned a lot of the kind of the back end stuff of driving. It's not just about going and driving. You have to go and work with the engineer, with with your teammates, with your mechanics to get that car right. But we went to pretty much all the Busch races. The only ones we didn't go to was when they went to Mexico. They kind of discouraged taking some family there because they wanted to make sure that the drivers got to and from the track on. I think they had like specific shuttle buses for them. Just to obviously Mexico City has a bit of a reputation just with the theft and crime, and they were a little concerned about that. So we didn't go to Mexico City, which was unfortunate because it's a super cool track and obviously an amazing city. We wanted to go and do that, but those are the only races that I didn't attend. And I believe he raced there with the Harvick at one point, and maybe Junior one year. I can't remember, but I always watched everything on TV whenever we couldn't go. But we pretty much went to all the races. Yeah.
That's amazing. I was going to bring up, wasn't it ironic that in 2007 in Montreal, how your dad got spun out while running second by his own boss, Kevin Harvick?
Yes. Yeah, there was a bit of a there was a bit of a joke with that afterwards, just because the I guess Harvick, I think, was still technically racing for Childress at that point, but he
What?
had his own team. He had his own team. Kevin Harvick Motorsports, or Kevin Harvick Racing, or whatever it
KHI.
was. KHI. There you go. And but Delane, his wife Delana, was basically running the team, and I think she was pretty ticked off with her husband after the race because I don't remember if he's hit us directly, but he was definitely in a kind of a bunch of cars that piled into my dad in turn two there. So I was in the stands for all the Montreal races, right at turn two. So I remember watching a lot of the stuff there, and it was chaos, and but a cool track. And I got to race there myself in 2019, and it's a very different track than what we're used to at CTMP, with the long fast corners at CTMP, formerly Mosport. And Montreal's a really technical, all about braking, and in those cars, all about making the brakes and the tires last, because it's just so hard on the equipment, going from basically a high speed straight line down to hard braking. Um, and with those cars, no downforce. I mean, F1, they have lots of downforce and great brakes, and but stock cars are a little bit require a little bit more patience, I think. So
Yeah. And your dad won the next year, I think, at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in a rainy day. What, didn't he?
yeah, he did. I remember that race pretty well. We were pretty sure, the pit stop strategy worked out really well for him. But then when he got out onto the track and with the wet tires, it was obvious that he was doing really well, and he's had a lot of experience in the wet in sports car racing at Le Mans, and there it's something that he was used to. So I think he kind of fell right into a rhythm, and I think him and maybe a couple other guys were kind of on the pace. I know, like maybe it was Carpentier, I think, and Marcus Ambrose, maybe like they were all lapping pretty quickly, but just with the way the pit stop strategy worked out, my dad was just way ahead. So, I mean, we were just praying that it wasn't gonna, lead to a whole lot of cautions because then, his lead was obviously going to get taken away. But when they called the caution and they brought everyone down pit lane, we were pretty sure that they were just going to end the race. And so I think for a while there, what they were trying to do was figure out, because it was raining so hard, figure out where to hold victory lane. And eventually they did it in one of the garages on the front straight. But I remember, basically running down the stands with my brother and running through the paddock, and we were just like, hollering and screaming, and because it had been a few years since my dad had won in NASCAR, when it was a 2008. So that was a really cool one, and we remember that. I remember that one really well. That was a good one for our family for sure.
Definitely was, because didn't your dad idolize Gilles Villeneuve?
Yeah, yeah. Gilles Villeneuve was a big, inspiration for a lot of Canadian drivers, and my dad kind of when in the '70s when he was just starting to get into racing was the same. My dad was starting to do some Formula Ford back then. Now it's Formula 1600 racing. And that was around the same time in the late '70s that Villeneuve, had kind of come up through the Atlantic series and raced for Ferrari, and he was a hero for Canadians. And I think pretty much any driver from that time kind of idolized him, and in Canada at least, and around the world for sure, because he had just such a flat out style. He was fearless, but naturally fast, and it's cool to be in the industry, and I've gotten to meet his widow Joanne, and I've met obviously Jacques a few times, and the things that they have to say, and friends of Gilles, and so we're kind of in this community where we got to hear the stories about him, and he was just such a naturally gifted operator, like whether it was, snowmobiles or, touring cars or formula cars or, motorcycles, he could drive anything. And it's been our kind of my dad's quest and kind of working on with him and my mom and my whole family the past, 15 years to help, develop kids in Canada through the karting ranks, because I think we're looking for the next Gilles Villeneuve, and how do we find that kid and help them get to the next level, because Canada is a great creates a great disproportionate number of great drivers for how small of a country population wise we are. So yeah, no, it's really cool. We have a lot of great drivers to look up to, Gilles included. For me, Jacques was that was kind of the era I grew up watching F1, so I was always cheering for Jacques, and it's cool. I got to race against him last year, which was awesome. Kind of, I started on the same row as him at Trois Rivières. He actually, we lined up on the front grid, and he had an ignition failure, so we actually never got to race side by side. But I was chasing him a little bit in practice. And then I saw him the night before at the hotel, and I talked. It was just so cool for it to come, kind of full circle for me, for one of my heroes, and a world champion to be able to qualify on the same row as a world champion. It was pretty awesome.
That's great. So let me get this to you now in your journey. What was it
Sure.
like when you got into racing and go-karts to begin?
Yeah, so at the time when I first started, my dad had a go kart series, which was really for the elite level of drivers in Canada, because kind of the way in sports car racing at least it works is you kind of have regional events and then national events, and then obviously you try to get your national drivers into international events in sports car racing. At least that's how it works, kind of. But it's the same in karting, and I think at the time there was a lot of regional events. There was a lot of support for go karting, but there really wasn't a national presence. And so in the 2000s, my dad with Sunoco in Canada basically set up a series called the Romfellow Sunoco Karting Championship. And out of that series, came Robert Wickens, Daniel Morad, Kyle Marcelli. I think Hinchcliffe was briefly in this series, but I don't think that he raced too much. He kind of moved. He moved very quickly. I think Hinchcliffe into cars, but he may have raced a little bit for our in our series. But um, and that for me that was very intimidating because I was pretty young and I wanted to get into karting, but I was looking basically constantly and seeing at how high a level it was. It was intimidating for me for sure. So I did a little bit of what I would call lower level karting, and then I kind of put it aside for a little bit. And where I kind of started to gain more of my experience as a driver was in 2007 2008, around there, when my dad had a connection to Spring Mountain, which has the Ron Fellows Performance Driving School. And so his kind of gift to me when I turned 15 or 16 was to go with him to the school, and basically I got to take the school. So I got to learn how to drive, a Corvette on a racetrack. And from then I would kind of go with him once or twice a year, and I would get to take the school. So I've taken the school probably like, 8, 9, 10 times. And that was kind of my outlet, was drive, pretty much just, high performance driving, like very, straightforward track day type of events at Spring Mountain and in the Corvette schools. And I did that for a while, and I got an understanding of what you needed to do as a driver to go fast. I got to a little bit of seat time, but for me, things didn't really start taking off until 2014, when I got directly involved in Canada in club racing. I had some good results. I got noticed by one of the big teams up here, and they basically told me that they would give me a touring car. They would I just had to find the money to run it. So I managed to have enough money to run one race, and we won the race, which was awesome. And then the next year, they basically said the same thing. They would love to put me in the Porsche Cup car, but I just needed to find the money to run it. So found the money to run half the season. Couldn't afford to do the full thing, and we did okay. And then from then on, I just kind of found my way over the past 3 years into the Pinty series, and I really enjoy the Pinty's cars. The sports car stuff is very competitive. It's very stressful, but there's something about the NASCAR format and the NASCAR stuff that just makes me feel more at home. I think it's more of a community. It's a lot more customizable than the sports car stuff, where you kind of buy a car direct from the factory, whether it's a BMW or a Porsche, and there's not a whole lot that you can change on the car. And you're usually running to a certain spec. Whereas in the Pinty series, we're kind of customizing at least some of the brake feel, and the way the shifter feels, and some of the gear ratios, and you can play around with the few different spec motors in this series, and I really enjoyed that side of it. I really enjoy like the mechanical part of working with my dad and the mechanics and the crew chief to try to get the car better, and that's what we've been working on. And the last 2 years I was running for a different team, and it just didn't really work out. At the beginning of the third year, when we were gonna basically renew with them, it wasn't kind of going the direction that we wanted to. So we decided to buy our own car basically, and run a limited schedule this year. And the plan is to race again next year. Hopefully, do more races. We need a little bit more sponsorship, of course, as always. But we didn't get the results we wanted this year, but we had decent results. 2 years ago with the other car, and I think that car, it was an older car. We had some really good results with it. So I think, personally, I think that with better equipment, let's say, I should be able to be a bit more competitive, and that's kind of what we're hoping for and we're working on. And obviously it's a super, super tough and competitive series, and there's a lot of really good drivers, and it's cool to have, we just had the race in Delaware, where we had some people come up from the States and race with us. And Noah Gragson and Amber Balkin, and so it was really cool to see that. I unfortunately had to miss that race, but I watched it on TV. But still, I think it's cool that we have support from the some of the biggest drivers there is in the country and in the continent. So it's pretty awesome. I'm happy right now with it, and just always trying to get to the next level, I think.
Yeah. What funny stories do you have from racing endurance and touring?
In the endurance series, in like
Yeah.
racing long races, yeah, the long races, the touring cars, the fun, yeah. I guess it's in touring cars. It was tough because we were basically running this spec kind of BMW, and pretty much everybody in the class was cheating. But we had been given the car by FAF Motorsports, and they basically told us that they wanted the car back in the same condition. Kind of the thing that people always say. And so we were basically at a crossroads where we figured that we kind of needed to make some changes to the car in order to kind of be on the same competitive level as the others that were. I think they had some chips in the car and they were kind of doing some stuff that wasn't totally, kosher, let's say. And but we basically said no, we don't want to do that. We want to. They give us the stock car, we're going to leave it stock. So and the gods were good to me because it rained for the race. And obviously, rain is the great equalizer. And so we went out there and we were able to win the race in the rain. And that was just really nice, kind of good feel to be kind of vindicating, knowing that, we couldn't get it done in the dry. I think we were like fourth in qualifying in the dry, and we were, a second and a half off or something. But to get into the rain where, the kind of history of drivers who are really good in the rain. And so I think everybody, you really want to try and be good at that, and that's super tough. And sports car racing is crazy, and it's kind of gotten out of hand. Honestly, with the way it is now is very customer based, and it's hard. It's hard if you don't have the financial backing to kind of get your foot in the door. So I'm in a position right now where my sponsors are more interested in the Pinty stuff. We're on TV here in Canada, so we've got some real you know real value, I think, for our sponsors in Canada. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah, there's lots of funny stories. From my own racing, from being kind of a fly on the wall with my dad, and yeah, it's been a good life so far. So we're gonna hopefully keep it going.